We're looking at clubs that have won the most Champions League titles. Paris Saint-Germain, one Champions League title. PSG won their first title by beating Inter Milan in 2025. They hold the record for the biggest margin of victory in Champions League final by scoring 5 goals against Inter. The last time PSG came close to winning the league was in 2020 when they lost to Bayern Munich 1-0. PSG are currently trying to beat Bayern Munich in the semis to reach the finals and win the title back-to-back. If they do, they will hold another record for being the only French club with the most Champions League titles. They are currently tied with another club that we'll see in the next slides. Manchester City, one Champions League title. City won their first Champions League title back in 2023 by beating Inter Milan 1-0 by a goal from Rodri. The first time Man City reached the Champions League final was back in 2021, where they lost to Chelsea by a goal from Kai Havertz. Under Pep Guardiola, they've been consistently in the knockout stages since 2018. They've been recently knocked out by Real Madrid on an aggregate scoreline of 1-5. PSV Eindhoven, one Champions League title. PSV's first and only Champions League final was back in 1988. Against Benfica in the final. They went to penalties to decide the winner, which PSV went on to win 6-5 thanks to Hans saving the penalty from Veloso. They haven't been able to reach the final again, but they have reached the semi-final 3 times, in 2005 being the latest. Recently, PSV were knocked out of the Champions League in the league phase, placing 28th. Feyenoord won Champions League title. Feyenoord won it in 1970, the European Cup, the predecessor to the Champions League, by winning it against a British club that we'll see later on, 2-1. They were the first Dutch club to win this title. Their biggest win was in 1969, 12-2 against an Icelandic club. For the latest season, Feyenoord failed to qualify for the league knockout phase against Fenerbahce in the 3rd qualifying round with an aggregate score of 6-5. Red Star Belgrade won Champions League title. In 1991, Red Star won their first and only Champions League title, then known as the European Champions Cup. On their way to the finals, they beat Bayern Munich 2-1 in the semis. Then in the finals, they met up with Olympique de Marseille. The match went on to a penalty shootout where Red Star did not miss a single penalty, ending it in a 5-3 score. For the latest Champions League, Red Star failed to qualify to the knockout stage in the playoff round, losing to Pafos. Aston Villa won Champions League title. In Rotterdam, Aston Villa beat Bayern Munich 1-0 in the European Cup final in the year 1982. But since 1983, Aston Villa has not participated in the European's top competition. It wasn't until under the manager Unai Emery they were able to participate in the 24-25 season of the Champions League. Currently, Aston Villa are in the Europa League semi-finals against Nottingham Forest, and in the Premier League they're sitting 5th place, qualifying them to the next season's Champions League. Star București won Champions League title. In 1986 European Cup final, they faced Barcelona. The game went on to penalties. Bucharest, having missed their first 2 penalties, didn't matter because Barcelona missed all 4 penalties, which gave Star Bucharest their first and only European Cup. 3 years later, Star Bucharest reached the final again, only to lose to AC Milan 4-0. In this season, the Champions League, Star Bucharest only made it as far as the 2nd qualifying round. Olympique de Marseille won Champions League title. Marseille were crowned European champions in 1993 after beating AC Milan in the final with the score of 1-0. The only other time Marseille was in the final was 2 years before in 1991, where they lost to Red Star Belgrade. Olympique shared the record for the only other French club to win the most Champions League titles, and that's with PSG. For the latest season of the Champions League, they were barely eliminated in the league phase, placing 25th, just shy of 1 placement to continue in the Champions League. Hamburger SV won Champions League title. With an early 9-minute goal from Felix Magath, Hamburger SV were able to defeat Juventus 1-0 in the 1983 European Cup final. 3 years before that, in the 1980 European Cup final, Hamburger SV lost to an English club by 1 goal. We'll get into that English club later on. And it has been over 20 years since Hamburger SV has been in the Champions League. They currently sit 11th place in the Bundesliga, so they will not participate in next season's Champions League. Celtic won Champions League title. Celtic are the first British club to win the European Cup back in 1967. With the goals from Gamel and Chambers, Celtic defeat Inter Milan 2-1. They reached the final again in 1970, only to lose to Feyenoord 2-1. In this season of the Champions League 25-26, Celtics were eliminated in the playoff round against Kairat. In the game against Kairat, it went to penalties. Celtics missed their first 2, while Kairat only missed 1, leaving the score 3-2. Borussia Dortmund won Champions League title. Dortmund reached the final 3 times, and the only time they were victorious was against the Italian club Juventus. In 1997, Dortmund beat Juve 3-1. And the other two times they reached the finals was in 2013, where they famously lost to Bayern Munich, their rivals, 2-1 under the manager Jurgen Klopp, and against Real Madrid in 2024, losing 2-0. In the latest season, Dortmund faced off Atalanta in the playoff, but lost to them in the reverse sweep 4-3. Porto, 2 Champions League titles. This is Portugal's most successful club in European competitions, reaching the Champions League only twice in 1986 and 2004. Porto won both of them. In 1986, Porto beat Bayern Munich, and then in 2004, led by famous manager Jose Mourinho, they beat AS Monaco 3-0. Porto has not played in the Champions League since 2024, when they lost to Arsenal in the round of 16, but will return in next season's Champions League as they are placed first in their domestic league. Nottingham Forest, 2 Champions League titles. Under Brian Clough, Nottingham Forest won the European Cup back-to-back. They won it in 1979 and 1980. In 1979, they defeated Malmo. In 1980, they defeated the German club Hamburger SV. Interestingly enough, Nottingham Forest won more European trophies than their own domestic league title. They only participated 3 times in the European tournament. It has now been 46 years since Nottingham Forest has been in the Champions League, dating all the way back since 1981. They currently sit 16th in their domestic league and will not participate in next year's Champions League. Benfica, 2 Champions League titles. Benfica won the European Cup back-to-back and almost won it again for 3 times in a row. Benfica won their first title in 1961 against Barcelona, winning 3-2. Then the following year, 1962, they beat Real Madrid, who had legendary players Puskas and Di Stefano. But with 2 goals from legendary player Eusebio, Benfica won their back-to-back European Cup. Benfica has been in the finals a whopping 7 times. They've only won 2 and lost 5. In 1963, Benfica lost to AC Milan. In 1965, they lost to Inter Milan. In 1968, they lost to famous English club with an iconic player, which we'll get into that later. In 1988, they lost to PSV, and the last time they appeared in the final was in 1990 against a stacked AC Milan with the likes of Barassi, Maldini, Ricard, Marco van Basten, Ruud Gullit, and a young Carlo Ancelotti. Juventus, 2 Champions League titles, winning this competition in 1985 against Liverpool, and in 1996 against Ajax. Juve still hold the record for the most finals lost, totaling 7. Juve has lost the finals to the likes of Ajax in 1973, Hamburger SV in 1983, Borussia Dortmund in 1997, Real Madrid in 1998, AC Milan in 2003, then Barcelona in 2015, and the last time they appeared in the Champions League final was in 2017 against Cristiano Ronaldo. Galatasaray knocked out Juventus in the playoff with an aggregate score of 7-5. Juventus are close to missing out next year's Champions League due to them being in 4th place, just ahead of Como. And if they end up in 5th, not qualifying, it will be the first time they don't play in Champions League since 2012. Chelsea, 2 Champions League titles. In 2012, led by their interim manager, Roberto, he led Chelsea to win their first ever Champions League title against Bayern Munich in their own stadium. They also had a player named Didier Drogba. Led by Thomas Tuchel in 2021, he helped Chelsea get their 2nd title, winning against Manchester City. The one other time they reached the final was in 2008, where they lost to Manchester United, who had a young Cristiano Ronaldo. Since 2004, Chelsea have been in the semifinals 8 times in 2004, 2005, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2012, 2014, and 2021. That's pretty impressive. Chelsea currently sit 9th in the Premier League and will not participate in next year's Champions League. Manchester United, 3 Champions League titles. Being one of 2 clubs that have 3 Champions Leagues, United has won this in 1968. 1999, and in 2008. In 1968, with the legendary player Bobby Charlton, Manchester United won their first European Cup against Eusebio's Benfica. Then, with the living legend Sir Alex Ferguson, he managed Manchester United to their 2nd and 3rd Champions League titles. Alex also managed United into 2 other finals, but lost to Barcelona twice in 2009 and 11, which was led by manager Pep Guardiola. Manchester United will participate in next year's Champions League as they place 3rd in the Premier League. Inter Milan, 3 Champions League titles, being the 3rd team to win this competition back-to-back. First, in 1964, they beat Real Madrid 3-1 in Vienna. Then the following year, 1965, they beat Benfica 1-0 in their home ground, San Siro. For the 3rd and final win, managed by legendary manager Jose Mourinho, they went on a legendary run, beating Barcelona, which has become a historic historical game due to Jose Mourinho coming from Barcelona, beating his ex-work friend and then rival Pep Guardiola 3-2. Inter Milan has lost the finals famously 4 other times. In 1967, they lost to the Celtics, who became the first British team to win the trophy. In 1972, they lost to Ajax, that gave Johan Cruyff his second Champions League. In 2023, they lost to Manchester City, giving them their first Champions League title. In 2025, they lost to PSG, giving them their first Champions League title as well, but with a 5-0 defeat for the record of the most goal margin in the Champions League final history. Inter Milan has also lost to Bodo Glimt in the playoff round, allowing them to reach the furthest they've ever had in the Champions League to the round of 16. Ajax, 4 Champions League titles, one of 3 teams to win European Cup 3 times in a row. Ajax has won a total of 4 times. They reached the finals 6 times, with arguably one of the best players of all time, Johan Cruyff. Ajax were able to win it 3 times in a row, starting in 1971. Then in 1972, and finally 1973. In 1969, they lost to AC Milan in Madrid 4-1. Their final win was in 1995, thanks to a late winner goal from Kluivert. They did reach the finals again the following year, but lost to Juventus in a penalty shootout, with the final score 4-2. The last time Ajax made an impressive run was in 2019 when they beat Juventus, Real Madrid, but lost to Tottenham Hotspur in the semi-finals. Barcelona, 5 Champions League titles. Being in the Champions League finals 8 times, Barcelona has won it 5. The first final losing to Star București in 1986. Then in 1961 they lost to Benfica. Then in 1992, their third final, they won it against Sampdoria, an Italian club. The next final they went on to, they lost to AC Milan 4-0 in 1994. But since then, they've won all their finals in 2006, 2009, 2011, and 2015, which they had arguably the best player of all time, Lionel Messi. Recently though, Barcelona has been disappointing in the last 5 years in their European competitions, but their future could look bright with their new star, Lamine Yamal. Bayern Munich, 6 Champions League titles, appearing in 11 finals. Bayern has won 6 of them. In Bayern's first ever 3 finals, led by captain Franz Beckenbauer, being in 1974 versus Atletico, 1975 versus Leeds, and 1976 versus Saint, they've won all 3. They are one of 3 teams to have ever won this competition 3 times in a row. Then in 1982 against Aston Villa, 1985 versus Porto, 1999 versus Manchester United, they lost all those finals. It wasn't until 2001 that they won it again, followed by 2 more defeats in 2010, 2012, and then finally 2 more wins in 2013 and 2020. In third place, tied with Bayern Munich for the most Champions League titles, Liverpool has appeared in 10. They've won their first 4 ever appearances in the Champions League final, winning in 1977, 78, 81, and 84 against the likes of Borussia Mönchengladbach, Club Brugge, Real Madrid, and Roma. Their next Champions League finals were a bit of back and forth. Liverpool lost to Juventus in 1985. In 2005, they faced AC Milan, winning in penalties. Then AC Milan got the revenge in 2007. 2018, they faced off Cristiano Ronaldo's Real Madrid team and lost. They came back the next year to beat Tottenham. Finally, the last time they reached the finals was in 2022, losing to Real Madrid once again. In the last Champions League campaign, they got knocked out by Galatasaray in the round of 16. AC Milan, 7 Champions League titles. In second place for the most Champions League titles, AC Milan has won this prestigious cup 7 times out of 11. Their first time in the finals was met with a loss against Real Madrid in 1958. But the next 4 times they reached the finals in 1963, 69, 89, and 1990 were met with success. AC Milan had a clear dynasty, being able to reach the Champions League finals 3 times in a row, but unfortunately winning only 1 of 3. This was their following streak: a loss to Marseille, a win against Barcelona, and a loss against Ajax. Reaching the finals 3 more times in 2003, 2005, and 2007, they were able to beat the 2003 against Juve and 2007 against Liverpool. The 2005 was a loss against Liverpool. Milan did not participate in this past year's Champions League, but are on track to participate in next year's. Now, for the best performing Champions League competitor, we have Real Madrid, winning an astonishing 15 Champions League titles. That's more than double of what second place had. Real Madrid is the only club to win this Champions League 5 times in a row, who had the legendary players like Di Stefano and Puskas. Then they won it again in 1966. It took them over 30 years to win it again in 1998 with Roberto Carlos, Seedorf, and Real. They won it again again in 2000, as well as in 2002 with the legendary player Zinedine Zidane. Real Madrid went on to another run with Cristiano Ronaldo leading the way to 4 Champions League titles in 5 years. They won it in 2014, then consecutively in 2016, 2017, 2018, then finally in 2022 and 2024. Real Madrid only lost this competition 3 times out of 18 finals. They lost to Benfica in 1962, Inter in 1964, and Liverpool in 1981. Real Madrid were only knocked out just recently in the quarterfinals against Bayern Munich with an aggregate score of 6-4. Recently, Real Madrid has not won a single trophy, European or domestic cup, in 2 years, so expect them to come back hungry next year. They could possibly win the Champions League once again, marking it their 16th Champions League title. So that's the history of these Champions League winners. What do you guys think? Did you enjoy this video? Let me know. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.